And could I now invite Pam Richardson and the team from Banks Peninsula Community Board?
I just thought I'd put up my label so that you know who we are. This is a recycled label, so it's very valuable to have it. And our board plan, which we focus on. So have a seat, ladies. So this morning I've got with me Tori Pedden, who's the Little River Wairera representative, and of course Joan Latchford, who's our governance advisor on my left. Look, it was a challenging morning, and attached to our presentation we have put the Banks Peninsula Community Board submission summary for you, a one-pager that gives you an outline of what we've got, and of course our submission is it's very full, yeah, I would love to see a time on top of these that we could actually be watching or the ticking over, because that clock has actually gone. So we haven't got much of an opportunity to follow what's going on. Anyway, I liken myself to Kim, and that we are the garden. Kim talked about her house and her living room and rooms of her house. We are the garden, Banks Peninsula. And the Banks Peninsula, as you see, those are some amazing photographs of our area. So I wanted to get into how we fit in with the city. And this next slide shows 100,000 hectares on the right-hand side and the very small area on the left at the top there of the city. So we've got 651 kilometres of council roads, 331 of which is 331 of unsealed. We've got 145 council parks, 116 local community parks, 8 garden parks and heritage parks, 6 sport parks and 15 regional parks. We've got 14 cemeteries based across the peninsula. We've got 7 major sport and recreation amenities in the area, and the Akaraa is the only cruise port at the moment in Canterbury, and we had over 200,000 visitors from the cruise ship season. So that's where we fit into the city, and what we want for the long term is a fit for future infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important for us. Over the years it has been, well, I heard people talk about sweated. Sounds like an awful term, but a lot of the facilities on Banks Peninsula have they're getting near the end of their life, and they need to be maintained to a better standard, or we start the planning process of a new one. The next one is about our transport, about our roads and our wharfs. Now this is where we've heard the most information from our communities. Of course, a lot of our information in this submission has come from the very many meetings that we've had, the reserve management committees that we work with, so we have many opportunities of working with our communities. So we pick up a lot of information, and our submission is based on that information that we collect from our communities. So this is an area where we're looking at doubling budgets because of the road metalling. Our roads are in very poor condition, and as I looked back over the weekend, I found a document that was 1998, Banks Peninsula District Council roading policy, and the same issues we are dealing with today. The base structure of those roads is in poor condition. We have not been able to improve the situation with the budget that we've been achieving over the years. So that will be in the system somewhere that will allow you to see what is being talked about. The culvert renewal programs is another one, as we're seeing increased storms on the peninsula, we need to make sure that our drainage is improved, and that the culverts are far too small. They're small culverts, they need a lot of maintaining. We need to see a greater budget to improve those. We need to see that the funding be brought forward for the Diamond Harbour Wharf renewal. The wharf is, Diamond Harbour Wharf is part of a network, part of a roading network, a tourism opportunity, and there are difficulties with it and its safety of it. So we're looking also for the start work soon as on the Akaraa Wharf renewal. When we ask for a renewal, for wharf renewal projects, we are asking that we actually, as our community, becomes clear to us when they're in the planning process, and there's some certainty that they are going to be looked at some stage, and a little bit of money to start a project would be very welcome to get the planning going through with our communities, because a lot of these projects, for example, the Akaraa Wharf will have to go through a number of steps to come out the other end. It is a historic wharf, and there will be a number of steps that need to go through. Safe drinking water, or the 3 waters, is another area where we want to see that we're improving the situation on Banks Peninsula. Unfortunately, the first one there, the Cairns Bay potable water supply, is in a community that has got a camping ground that is very popular. It's got a museum, a school, but it's got a very small base population. And at the moment, that water supply is it doesn't meet the standards at all. It's not a good situation at all, and it puts the City Council in poor light that we have a council that has got a CC management in it, involved with the community and Ngāi Tahu, and we haven't got a good community water supply. Same with Wainui wastewater supply. It's been one that's been in and out of the system over the years, and that back in 2011 that proposal was identified being in the long-term plan. Today it's not included in it at all. It is for a very small community, but it's vital that we get the water out of the harbour, Akaroa Harbour, and onto land. So what's the use of taking the Akaroa wastewater out of the harbour if we're going to have it going in on the Wainui side? So we need to look at how we can do that. And in our submission there we give perhaps an idea of an example of what we might do to resolve that. For regional facilities, a lot of the facilities, a lot of the things that we've got on Banks Peninsula, you could consider them regional facilities, like the Diamond Harbour Wharf, the Akaroa Harbour Wharf. The Acanes Bay water scheme is you could consider that a regional facility as well. So Naval Point, and that's a bit confused in the document. It talks about Littleton Marina and Environment's development be included as presented in the draft, but it's Naval Point. And Naval Point is very important for our water activities, whether it's swimming, board surfing, whatever it might be, that it's important that we have a facility there. And there is some funding that is already being identified from the community that they would be quite happy to form partnership and look at building to house Naval Point and also the Coast Guard. So there are a lot of opportunities down there for working together as a team. Now, what we want from the long-term plan are connected communities and empowered citizens, and I think that we, over the years, have got those. As you can see up there, we've got the Acanes Bay Camping Ground, we've got the Devotional Hall in the middle, we've got the Little Akaroa Hall, we've got Little River and the Big Ideas, and we've got the Diamond Harbour Plan. So we have worked with many of our communities over the years. The three at the bottom will be run by reserve committees, and then the two at the top are village planning and residents and ratepayers, local residents behind them. So for our local facilities, those were those little things that we included back there, like the Devotionals Hall and the Little Akaroa, and there are many others. Allendale's got a new one, Governor's Bay's got a new one, but for many of them, they're very old, not decrepit or due for to be demolished. They are focuses of our community. For example, the Pigeon Bay Hall. So a little bit of money would help to improve those facilities and continue to keep those groups working in behind him. The next one is we talk about is the Banks Peninsula toilet block renewals. What a subject. Anyway, the funding has been identified for a number of toilet blocks across the peninsula. So we're looking at asking the council, could we put the lump sum together for those toilet blocks on the peninsula and look at working through with the community board and the communities to work out which ones are more important than others that we should be starting with or doing the work on. So if we go to community planning, we've had two planning processes over recent years, the Little River Big Ideas and the Diamond Harbour Village Plan. Both of those have got a plan at very little cost. $15,000 was allocated to them, and I don't think either of them used their full funding amount. So it would be nice now to look at allowing them to have some funding to do some of those projects, and there are many of them, and you'll hear from the Little River Rairera Trust who's looking at pushing those forward, and of course our submission also talks about some of those things. So coastal inundation is one where we look at needs to come forward. We need to be thinking about it now. In fact, tomorrow we've got a power cut in Pigeon Bay where Orion are actually putting risers on our power poles because they're in the sea now, that the sea walls have disappeared. So it is in front of our eyes, and we need to start with working with our Banks Peninsula communities to look at how we're going to deal with it. And they're quite major issues. So maximising our investment. It's about empowerment through partnerships, and those are all the plans that we've got. There are a whole host of them that we've got here. The Littleton Port Plan, Recovery Plan, the iwi Management Plan, Whakahora, the Littleton Master Plan. There's a huge number of them, and there's others as well as those there. But it is about empowering through partnership, and that's how we in Banks Peninsula, well, how the whole city needs to be looking at how can we get the best out of our communities at the least cost. And a little bit of money goes a long way. So they're just finally here. The next one, where does the money come from? It's about board empowerment. It may be that we're looking at prioritising the funding that's allocated to some of those Banks Peninsula projects, and we look clearly look at where they might go. Maybe we look at the cemeteries funding and decide where it might best be spent. But we thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. And on the final slide, we've got our vision and our way of working, which comes from our board plan. I just wanted to make one final little comment about the rating and the rates proposal for the Akaroa Health Hub. And the difficulty for our community. We're looking at raising over $3 million for our integrated health centre, and that this looked as though it might have been a way that we could actually support our community, just the Akaroa community, to get some extra funding to support them to assist with that process. I look at the development that you have available for improvement in a business district, improvement. Why can't that sort of be looked at for the similar sort of situation for helping a community? Our hospital and health facilities are public facilities, they're not private. So can I just tag that little one at the end? It's, raise the profile of it. Yeah,
well, I'm glad that you raised that one at the end, because that was the one that I wanted to ask about. You know, it did occur to me, I went out to a meeting with one of the councillors, Dion Swiggs, with the Sydenham business community, and they kind of the business improvement district model, which has been established in our planning processes, they weren't really aware of it and didn't really see that it was a possibility, and were quite interested in it. So I think that raising it now, as you have, it is good. I have to say the weight of submissions don't seem to support the idea, but I think that's because they haven't had a real example such as yours. And so maybe what we need to do is, in order to facilitate your community that wants to be considered in this way, is whether we can find a mechanism for expanding a business improvement district model into a more community-oriented model. But it does present us with a challenge, because you've got a real example, a real live example where the community's on board, and I think that it's been quite challenging for people to think, well, we don't want another rate, but they don't see it, that it's actually a fundraising mechanism for something that people want, and that they have to vote for it in order to go down that track. But it has been a bit of a wake-up call about how important that is. So I'm just kind of reinforcing that. But anyway, I've got Sarah and then Vicky.
Hi Pam, thanks so much for that. Really good to see it. I was just wondering, while the budget for everywhere is very tight with everything,
yes.
You've got some key priorities that have been around for a while, such as the Akaroa Wharf and Diamond Harbour, those kind of things. And you've also got the Naval Point. I'm just wondering if it would be useful to have the ability to be able to prioritise within those, if funding wasn't available to add more, then whether it would be useful for you as a board to be able to prioritise funding within those at all.
I think that would be very difficult for us to do that, because they're there for different reasons.
I know.
Naval Point is for recreation, Diamond Harbour is for a transport network, Akaroa is for cruise ships, economics, visitors. It's very difficult. So I think that we would accept that perhaps a little bit of seeding funding to start the processes, to get them moving along, get the working groups going, to look at how they're going to do it, what's going to be involved, like we have with Naval Point, and then we need to know that it's going to be included in the long-term plan as soon as possible.
But so Naval Point's got a big chunk now.
Yes,
so it's got some. It had some seed initially. Now it's got a bit of a chunk.
Yes.
Would maybe taking some of that chunk to do seed funding for the other ones to look at how they would be developed, just a little bit.
No, I can't.
If there's no other funding available.
Yeah. These are regional facilities. I would claim that these are other regional facilities, and that perhaps some of the budgets in town need to be looked at so that we can actually complete these facilities for the region. They are for the region. They're not for Banks Peninsula totally. They are mainly for the region.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of them are health and safety issues.
Yep. Yeah,
Condition.
the safety stuff is really, really important.
Yes,
That's why I was
yes.
sort of some of the other,
Yeah.
It's one of those, if there's not extra funding available, then would you like the opportunity to choose?
I don't know. We haven't considered that as a board, whether we can choose.
Vicky.
Thank you for the submission. I noticed in the Fendleton Waimaori one this morning, or Fendleton, whatever you are now, one this morning that they allocated they did a big graph that they put up there on the contributions versus the proposed capital expenditure by ward. Banks Peninsula was interesting in that the capital expenditure is about, on this graph, about 13 to 14%, and the rates contribution about 2.5%.
Right.
So there is a major contribution from the rest of the city ratepayers. What I'm intrigued by then is your response to the fuel tax, and I understand the logic behind it, but given how much other ratepayers are contributing here, what's your alternative suggested spreading of the rates burden given how high it will become?
Well, I think you've got to look at Banks Peninsula. What is Banks Peninsula? It is the backdrop to the city.
No, I got the garden analogy and all of that.
Yeah, it's regional issues that we're doing, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's very unfair to look at those ratepayers are there paying for all of those things that are there in our
So
community.
there was a question in the thing about alternative forms of revenue raising,
Yes.
and you didn't like the fuel tax, so I would have expected that you would have looked at something else, something different.
We haven't had the time to look at anything else that's different, Vicky. I think that's quite an unfair question of expecting. It was a very short time frame that was around that. We're not economists. I think it's a bit unreasonable to expect us as a community to come up as alternative. Perhaps we might put a road tax at the beginning of Banks Peninsula and collect from all of those that come and visit us. I don't know. It's difficult. And the very people that you'll take that extra road tax are us that can travel long distances to your meetings to do things in town. And yet our roads are in poor condition. So we need to look at it equitably. Yeah, we do need to look at it equitably and fairly.
It is very challenging. I mean,
Yes.
the truth is that, you know, and I've said it before, the shotgun wedding between Christchurch City and Banks Peninsula was always going to play out this way. So we have to find a way that we can work together in order to achieve what needs to be achieved. There's enormous challenges facing us, particularly with Akaroa wastewater, the other things that you've highlighted. So we're going to have to, it is going to be a question of working together to find solutions. And
maybe that we start now. We don't leave it until just a few months before we look at the next.
I totally agree.
Start right now, working together, thinking how we can do it.
I've read the submissions for tomorrow, and I know a number of people are going to say that we can actually do this whole process of LTPs a lot better,
Yes.
and I agree. And I think that Raf said this before, so I'm just going to steal his idea but attribute, and that is that if we actually just think of this as an iterative process every year,
Yeah.
I mean, you can change an LTP every year, just whether you have to go through a special consultative procedure or not in a consultation document depends on the significance of the changes that you're making. So why not take this as a much more iterative process over the 3-year term and then engage the community in the consultation documents themselves. So leave it. I mean, I'm not saying leave it with us, but work with us over how we could do this better over the long term.
It's our communities that need to work with us too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yanni?
Thank you for
Aaron.
your submission, and I do want to acknowledge that the Peninsula community has been very good at looking at how to work with us jointly, and has got, I guess, because of the history, a way of doing things which seem a lot less than what we would do. And with that being said, I was really interested in the naval point, because it seems a huge amount of money, given all the concerns that you've raised and all the other things that you'd like funded. Have you thought about how much of that would just be essential to get something there that would be, you know, it's still an upgrade, but at a much greater reduction of cost? so that we could fund some of the other things that you're asking for?
Well, there are some things that that the Naval Point team have been looking at, that, you know, putting in something that might be temporary, but as we know, temporary often becomes permanent. And the thoughts of, there have been some thoughts with groups that you're far better to put a more substantial bit in to start off with to get it moving, rather than putting something in. For example, taking the pontoons that are out there now in Littleton that you could pick up and use, but they're in a poor condition. They're the best of the poor, but you know, the advice is that we need to use it for, we need to put something that's in and fits in with the plan that's going to move ahead. But certainly, maybe that is an option, that we actually look at it. What can we start doing? It's vital.
I'd be really interested, given the number of things that you've asked us to look at funding for, if you could look at the Naval Point projects and work out which was really the most important. And also, you mentioned that was seen as a regional facility,
yes.
And yet the community board's got the delegation over it.
Yes.
So are you happy to give up delegation if it's a regional metropolitan facility?
Well, I don't know that we'd give it up, would we? We would be part of it, wouldn't we? I'm not sure. But
Right, can I just take Aaron, because we're right on the deadline for time.
Oh yeah, mine was just a quick point, and I loved your photos at the start. You're certainly competing with the eastern suburbs for the best photos of the city, the best looking part, and the analogy around the garden versus the living room and stuff, I think it's better a family analogy, and I look at Banks Peninsula more like a Mirabelle wife, that they look really good but very expensive.
I love it. So just
I'm actually going to strongly object to that comment, and I'm actually going to rule it out of order. I mean, I know what you're trying to say, and it just really was a very bad way to try and say it. So just you know, that's fine for Friday night. I don't have to go.
Leanne, can I just say in closing, can I thank our board team that gives us a hand to do this. We've got some amazing skills within our staff to allow us to put these presentations together. We have spent many hours, many hours over the last few months getting things together, understanding what the issues are, and they're really deserving of wonderful accolades. Yes.
Thank you very much, and very well deserved. Thank you. Right, if we could have